All right, man. Sweet. So let me get this pulled up. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Entrepreneurship Unlocked. Today on our show, we have Adam Turmakhan. Adam is the owner of TurmaFinTech. Today, we will learn more about Adam's entrepreneurial journey. Adam, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Nate, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Happy to have you on. So, Adam, for people that have not heard of you before or Turma FinTech, what is the quick version of what you guys are building?
At TurmaFinTech, our main goal is to help smaller institutions, financial institutions like community banks, credit unions, monetize their data. Because the current problem we see is that they have lots of data, but there are no tools to turn this data into growth.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's certainly industries that have been there for a very long time, right? I'm sure they're very slow moving with new technologies and new softwares and things like that. Is that something that you see a lot? Is just a lot of these larger institutions, it's hard to get them to move on things. But obviously, we're living in a day and age where there's so much technology available at our fingertips that these types of companies can leverage and really use to support their business. Is that something that you see as just kind of like a slow adoption to many different types of technologies out there for the types of customers that you work with?
I think it's really opposite for the bigger banks. Big banks, they are already way ahead in this regard. They're
Mm.
employing AI, employing data for some reason. And I mean, I know these reasons, but for some reason, community banks are a bit hesitant about taking this technology. And I think it's a lack of resources. I think this is the best problem. And I definitely see this issue. Yeah.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So, Adam, to give the people a little bit more background, I always like to talk about the entrepreneurial side of things, right? Growing the business, building the business, the and all the fun that's behind that, and all the hard work and all those things. Did you always know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or was it something more so like you saw a gap in the marketplace and then kind of stumbled into entrepreneurship?
I think it's something that was slowly coming to my understanding. I never liked when things are slow. And
Mm.
my career started in a banking industry. I was a financial analyst, and things are they aren't slow, but they're similar every day. And I really it was not something I wanted. And at some point, it wasn't something that just popped in my mind, but I think it was gradually coming to the point when I understood that I want to create something of my own,
Mm.
where where my decisions are actually affecting something and they matter. So I think it was that gradual understanding.
Yeah, right on. That's awesome. Yeah, I think more often than not, that's what I hear from the entrepreneurs that I interview. Many of them didn't, when they were 15 years old, they weren't like, I want to own a business someday. Wasn't necessarily the goal. But through working in a particular industry, finding something that they're interested in, but more importantly, finding gaps in the marketplace and finding ways to insert yourself as a solution to a lot of those gaps and things that might be missing. That's more often than not what I hear from a lot of the people that I interview. But Adam, what was when you first started working with community banks, credit unions? What problems did you notice at first that you quickly wanted to fix and thus build your company around?
So during my time in as a financial analyst in a bank, it was back in Kazakhstan. I saw a data science department, and that I saw how they were employing the data, and that was actually affecting the business outcomes,
Mm.
and that was really interesting for me to learn. So then I started learning more about it, and that's how we decided to start Turma FinTech. We thought that there's a great opportunity to help these community bankers, and yeah, I think this is how we decided to come to that.
Yeah, very nice. So, did you grow up in Kazakhstan or in the United States?
I lived in Kazakhstan until 16,
Nice.
and I've been here for about 11 years now.
Right on. Yeah, I mean, your English is very good for only been
Thank
living in the United States for 11 years. what are some differences in the banking systems between America and Kazakhstan? I mean, personally, obviously, I'm not very familiar with how Kazakhstan does banking, but just curious to know like what some of those differences are.
Um, I think the biggest differentiator is that since Kazakhstan is an emerging economy, they're more flexible. Banks are more flexible in terms of implementing new technology, in
Mm,
terms of trying new things. Here, it's more of everything is so the bureaucracy is so it makes it so it makes it very slow to make any changes. For instance, when we talk to bankers and we want to implement the platform, it's really you have to keep so many doors open at the same time, and
mm.
this makes it very complex. In Kazakhstan, it would have been just one door, perhaps two doors, but it would be way quicker to decide whether it's yes or no.
Yeah, that makes sense. Totally makes sense. Yeah, I hear that. I think a lot of the as a marketing agency owner, a lot of the decision makers that I work with at companies, in the United States primarily, it seems like the larger the company, at least in my area, in my expertise, the larger the company, the harder it is to get people to change, right? So, for example, if I want to work with like McDonald's, right, they're not a client of mine, but I would love if they were. But very very large company, they have not only a chief marketing officer, but they probably have a few different types of directors of marketing. They have, marketing managers all over the country. They have so many marketing activities going on at once that, nobody, not one single person at McDonald's actually knows what's really going on with all their marketing efforts at once. So, getting a team like that to, for example, utilize my services as an agency, that's, realistically, that's a business deal that would probably take 5 years to close, at least.
I
So
can
yeah,
imagine, yeah.
that's definitely something that I see, from for myself. So Adam, when get conversations with organizations, for example, in the United States, right, like credit unions, or maybe local banks, what are the things that typically get them to say yes to trying new technologies?
Usually it's when we show them the exact plan. And usually, for instance, we started the company by saying we started everything and we said it will take about 90 days to implement the platform. And it was a bit long for their liking. So we tried to minimize all the unnecessary parts, and we
Mm.
say, okay, now we're gonna give you one good solution. It's gonna take 30 days. We need this from you with this. So we try to be as specific as possible, show them the detailed plan, and in these cases, they they see the clear picture and they agree. But when it's a bit when there is a ambiguity, it's they don't like it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely, again, something I relate to a lot. When I'm putting together marketing plans for potential clients that I may work with, typically I don't try to say, oh, this is your marketing strategy, right? Instead, I'll say, this is the strategy to generate leads from meta ads, or this is the strategy to generate online sales from Google Performance Max or from YouTube ads, for example. Really trying to get extremely clear about the goal and how we accomplish it, as opposed to saying, oh, I'm going to do your marketing, right? Because it's like, what does that even mean, right?
Mhm.
Not only have I noticed this help me with overall conversion rates when I give presentations and try to close deals, um, but also even just in like my website efforts, so the content I put on my website, and even the outreach messages that I send to try to get meetings, right? It's you know these decision makers that you and I talk to are being bombarded every day by dozens, at least, if not hundreds of people trying to sell them maybe similar things or things in the same ballpark, right? So it's like, how do I really cut through that clutter? I think it's really understanding what the client's goals are and then tailoring every single conversation, every strategy, every recap call that we do around what are your goals, how are we going to accomplish them, instead of, in my case, just talking about general marketing activities. So yeah, that's definitely something that really resonates with me. So Adam, let's talk about AI, right? I'm sure that's something that you're using in your world, of course, something that I use in mine. So what are some actually, in the industry you work in, how is AI really being used in a useful way? Because I'm sure, you and I would both probably agree there's a lot of lot of AI being used that's really not useful. It's maybe it's not quite there technology wise yet. But how are companies in your space using AI correctly to help with business outcomes?
I think the best I think the best way to approach AI is to understand what you want from it. Mo Most of bankers, when they approach AI, they hesitant because they have this they have this um, understanding that AI is going to replace their employees, or that AI is very expensive and it's a big risk. But I think when you know clearly what you want from the AI, for instance, let's say a bank is losing lots of deposits, so AI can really use their data to understand the average profile of their client, and from there they can attract more clients who are more people are likely to become their clients.
Hmm.
So I think when you know exactly the problem you want to solve, and the strategy you want to use, then you can employ AI. Because if you just employ AI, it's just gonna be there, but it's not gonna be doing anything for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you got to use it in the right ways, right? There's smart ways to use there's smart ways to use AI, and there's dumb ways to use AI. That's for sure. And yeah, it should never be positioned as something that's gonna replace your employees. I mean, will it potentially down the road replace employees, and has it already across some industries? Yes, of course. But I remember 10 years ago, um, tons of business leaders saying AI within the next 10 years is going to replace all jobs, and here we are 10 years later. Most people have not had their jobs replaced. There's no secret about that. um, and hey, if AI can help further what your employees do, that's really what it's meant to do, right? Make their lives a little bit easier, free up some of their time so they could focus on more critical activities, and they're not doing, little silly Excel spreadsheets manually adjusting everything, right? Having AI go through and do those types of tasks, I think really helps in any line of business when you think about it. If you're using AI to free up time or to make some remedial tasks much easier, then it probably makes sense to use it for your business. But if you're using it to make business critical decisions, maybe you shouldn't be using it, right?
Mhm.
So there's a right time and place, and a right kind of methodology to roll out AI for any type of company. There's no secret about that. What do you think, Adam, in terms of like some of the community banks you work with or the credit unions? What are they leaving on the table by not utilizing their data as best as they can?
Um, so in the banking trend, I mean, I think it's in fintech in general. There is a trend of SaaS, solution as a service, and these service providers, they help banks create some analytics. So they, they help them employ AI, but the difference between, for example, us, we help to build in-house capacity where the bank doesn't really rely on anyone. In
Hmm.
this case, they can monetize the data, and it's there. It's their data. It belongs to them. In case we see right now, the current trend is that they give their data away to other companies who monetize their data, and I just feel like it's a bit unfair. But at the same time, I understand that bankers are not quite there in terms of expertise and resources.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. That totally makes sense. Yeah, I'm sure there's so many data points when it comes to banks and credit unions, right? I mean, I can't even imagine, when you take a look under the hood, all the data points that are there, and determining which of them are, data points that you want to take action based upon, and which are data points that you're like, hey, these aren't extremely relevant. We don't need to take action on them. Um, yeah, that's super interesting. And Adam, there's no secret, you're a very young founder, just like myself, which is great to see. Especially we live in a day and age where entrepreneurship is much more accessible than it ever has been, right? Which brings a few things to the table, right? It brings opportunity for guys like us that want to start businesses, but it also brings opportunity for everybody else, right? And it can be there could be a lot more noise. There's a lot more players in the space, right? So from a competitive standpoint, it could be a little bit more competitive, but hey, at least we're in the game to begin with. Do you ever feel like being a very young entrepreneur um, in a space where you're working with these financial institutions, which are probably not being run by people in their 20s or even 30s, right? You're probably working with people, I would imagine, between their 40s and 70s potentially. Do you ever feel like that because you're a young entrepreneur, you have to kind of prove yourself more than other entrepreneurs have to, or is that something that you don't totally see?
I honestly sometimes feel that way, but at the same time, I understand that the earlier you start, the better you will be in the long run.
Yep.
So, but yeah, I definitely understand that for lots of bankers, when they when they look at me, it's uh, they just question they just question like the whole conversation. I feel like, but yeah, I think the earlier you start, the better you will be in the long term, and I think this is the most important part.
Yeah, 100%. Um, that's something that I run into as well. People, I'll be talking to prospective clients, people I want to do business with, but haven't yet done business with. And sometimes they'll ask me how old I am. And, I just celebrated my 30th birthday a few days ago. But before that, I was in my 20s, right? And trying to get people that might be in their 60s or 70s to buy in. I think for me, the fact that I work in digital advertising, I won't necessarily say it's a young man or a young woman's game because it's still marketing, it's still advertising. Marketing and advertising have been around long before I ever existed. But being someone that's a specialist with certain platforms, right, like social media advertising, Google advertising, I think for me, it's it. I don't have to overcome that objection too much. Once in a while there will be that, but for the most part, I'm just lucky enough to be in an industry where a lot of the industry leaders or thought leaders are people that are under 40 really. So for me it's not necessarily something that I have to overcome. But yeah, I was just curious about you because obviously you're in an industry where you're dealing with business decision makers that are probably a little bit older than who I'm working with, and have probably done things a certain way for a very long time, and getting them to shift gears I know can be tricky. So yeah, super interesting stuff. um, what have you learned about communicating with some of those older decision makers and getting them on board? Are there strategies you use or things that you talk about when you get that objection to kind of help you overcome it?
I think I think I try to be authentic, and I how do you say it? The reputation is very important. So
Mm.
you don't want to be the liar. So I don't try to oversell or promise something I cannot do. And I think this is what I understood and how I try to communicate with them by being honest and by telling them. So sometimes they say, "Can you do that?" Because that's that's actually possible. That's on the market. But if you cannot do it, then yeah, I just say I'm just being honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Honesty and authenticity is something that helps anyone in any line of business stand out. Um, there's nothing worse than, yeah, business people who are shady or lie or maybe aren't very clear about things. You mentioned earlier, really narrowing down and clarifying what your client's goals are and then putting all of your efforts towards that. Right, that's a way to cut through the clutter. That's a way to get around all of the noise, all the other people in your industry that have been doing the same things the same way forever. And maybe they don't have the type of solutions that you have. Right, that's a great way to be able to prove that to people and stand out and build trust. There's no secret, people can acquire clients, right, but to keep clients for years and years and potentially decades and decades takes tons of trust. That's not something that gets built overnight. And you just like myself, we're very young, so we have time on our side, right? We have the benefit of being able to build these relationships that might take very long to build, because we have time on our side, because we started early, right? So yeah, Adam, what excites you most about what you are currently building right now?
I think is that I'm on my personal from my personal side is that I'm overcoming so many fears of my own, and it's like you meet people and you attend these conferences, and in the beginning it was very uncomfortable for me. But the more I try, the more I do, it just becomes so normal. And then even other things that used to scare you are no longer that scary. But I think that the tech side, it also excites me in a way that we are trying to help, and I think that really excites me. That we're not trying to make profits. We're really just seeing so many banks struggle, especially because my father, he's a former banker, so he just understands how they operate and how they work. So I think, yeah, helping also excites me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think overcoming fears, that's something that my listeners are going to resonate with. Being a business owner in any industry is not easy, right? And there's moments in business, make or break moments, things that you have to do that you don't want to do.
Hmm.
Right, fears that you have to overcome. I know for a lot of people, a lot of clients I work with, a lot of other marketing agency owners that I know, for example, cold calling, a lot of people hate to do it, but it is something that works, right? And it is a necessary part of business for many industries. That's something that I've talked about with previous guests on the show, that maybe fears that they had. um, or there might be, like, imposter syndrome, for example, right? Especially when you're a brand new business owner, it's like you haven't really proven yourself yet, right? I know,
Hmm.
at least for me, when I first started my marketing agency, you have to get your first few clients, right? And you have to
Hmm.
build that trust and get them to buy into what you're doing. So there can definitely be that imposter syndrome in place. I know that was something for me. Fortunately, I was able to get over pretty quickly. I think that my passion for what I do is one thing that really helped me get over it. I desperately want to go out and help businesses drive more revenue. I want to be the reason that a small family owned business owner can send his kid to private school, or take an extra vacation once a year, or save up a little bit of money for their kids' college, or what have you, right? Help them achieve their goals. Um, what are some of those maybe fears that you had coming into entrepreneurship that you were able to overcome through different ways?
Um, my biggest fear before we started everything was a fear of public speech,
Mm,
and that's why I made sure to publicly speak on these conferences, and it just feels great after you do it. And this was one of my biggest fears. I think in general, it was I think fear was the biggest one. Yeah, I mean the fear of public speech.
yeah, that's fair, and I'm sure it's especially difficult. Someone that came over to America at age 16, right? It's not easier for you than it is for an American to go out and give a speech, right? But through determination, through practice, right, and just saying, "Hey, I'm going to do this, and if I do great, that's amazing. If I don't do great, that's okay," right? You're going to have so many additional attempts in the future to do public speaking, and so many more opportunities. I think certainly you're a good communicator based on our conversation so far. But
Thank you.
yeah, that's awesome to hear that even as an immigrant coming to the U.S., you had these additional obstacles, right? You have to master the English language. You have to learn how Americans give presentations, or maybe even better yet, how Americans perceive presentations.
Mhm.
And kind of tailor your style, customize the way that you talk, and the way you engage with audiences around that. I think that's really cool. That's it's always great hearing about immigrants that come to the United States, start a business, face their fears. That's really inspiring stuff. And again, something that I think my listeners will really resonate with. So that sounds like definitely a fear that you got over, something you successfully hurdled it. What else, Adam, would you say that you're much better at now in business, or on the tech side of things even, than when you first started?
I think it's that when you just start the business, you think that you have the idea and you know things, but then it turns out that the industry is very different, and there are so many obstacles you didn't even see. And then you try different approaches, you try different things, you learn more stuff. So I think trying I think trying was the biggest thing here.
Yeah. Yeah. You just got to put yourself out there. Gotta be willing to risk the dice and take the chance. And you're somebody that has, and it seems like it's clearly paying off.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Adam, to wrap up, tell the people where they can get in touch with you, where they can learn more about TurmaFinTech. Where how can people get in touch?
They can learn more about TurmaFinTech on turmafintech.com, and they can find me on LinkedIn by my name.
Excellent. Well, yeah, Adam, this has been a great episode. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I hope you all enjoyed this episode today with Adam Turmakhan.